St. Jude's novena every Wednesday night. We'd go to that. And our grandson would say, well, why are we doing this? We never went to church, and all of a sudden you guys want to go to church all the time.
But because we did, he started to come and became an altar boy. And then he started to serve at every Mass he could. Father always knew that he could depend on him. You see, we are the living example. We must, and you know, I met someone today who's homeschooling, and I'm very pro homeschooling, okay? But if you just take care, that's what we did. We did everything right. We were interviewed once on secular television in Monterrey, Mexico, and the interviewer said, what did you do wrong? And we said, we didn't do anything wrong. We played together, we prayed together. I mean, we were a very close-knit family. We didn't do anything wrong. And then I thought about it, and I said, yes, we did. We did not change the world. It's not enough. You can give your children the most cloistered, wonderful education that you want, like us. You can try to put the cotton around them. They've got to live in the world. You've got to change the world.
Microphone down.
You tell me down. He tells me up.
I didn't tell you up.
No.
Who told you up?
I'm not telling you.
Carmine, did you tell her up? No.
We've got to change the world. You know, one time...
When this happened with us, and we left the church, we didn't know. We had no idea what we were leaving. We never went to a talk like this. They didn't
wouldn't
give
have
them in
gone
those
to a talk
days.
like this, right?
They didn't have things like this. We really knew very little about our church, and I hate to tell you this, I went to Catholic grammar school and high school. I knew nothing. I really knew. Sure, I didn't pay attention, but I really knew nothing. And so when tragedy struck, we had nothing to hold on to. We did not know Jesus in the Eucharist. We didn't know the treasures of our church. We wrote a book last year about the treasures. What do we know about our church? We're trying to teach the people the treasures of our church, that which makes us Catholic and separates us from the other gods. So before we walk away from our church, when tragedy strikes, we should know what it is we're walking away from. We should know the gifts that we've been giving, the treasures that we've got in our church.
When we lost our son, and you know, the enemy is a sneak, isn't he? He's a sneak. He's not forthright. He's not a good old-fashioned crook that comes up to you with a gun. No, he's a sneak. And so when we lost our son, I really felt like I was the only mother who had ever lost a son. See, I didn't know Mother Mary. And people, sometimes a woman will yell out, why aren't you born a Catholic? Sure, I was born a Catholic. But I took her out at Easter, put her back, took her out at Christmas, put her back. I didn't have a relationship with Mary. If I had had a relationship, would I have grieved? Yeah. 27 years later, I still grieve. Sorry, fellas, I do. I miss my son. But at least I would have had my mother, my heavenly mother. My earthly mother was gone. I would have had a heavenly mother. I could have held her hand. She could have told me how she felt when she held her son's body in her arms. But when tragedy strikes and you don't know your heavenly mother, you don't know that there is someone there that you can speak to, you mourn alone. For the first time in our life, Bob and I grieved separately. I couldn't touch him and he couldn't touch me. I had no one to talk to. Who would understand? Who would understand the anger? I was angry. Someone said that she looked up to God and said, I hate you. If you're alive, if you're real, I hate you. Somebody get me a tissue soon. And I said, so did I. I hate you. How could you take my son?
The Eucharist, the power, the strength of the Eucharist, we didn't know. We didn't have a head and a heart knowledge of Jesus in the Eucharist. I knew the words that I had learned. I knew the words that the priest would say during the Mass, during the consecration of the Mass. And I understood with my head, yes, Jesus is in the host. But I didn't know. I really didn't know. My heart didn't flutter when I was in the presence of Jesus. I didn't get excited when the priest called down the Holy Spirit at the beginning of the Eucharistic prayer. I didn't know. Had I known, I never could have walked away from my church. And one of the things that we did vow when we came back was that we would try with all our hearts for the rest of our lives to make Jesus in the Eucharist known to all the people.
You know, I look at people who are married to non-Catholics, and sometimes I hear them say, I don't know what to do with my husband. My wife, she doesn't have the relationship that I have with Jesus. And I say to them, she's scared out of her life. She's scared out of her wits. Your husband is petrified right now. And I can speak with authority on that because first my husband came back. And I went through all the, I walked with him, we walked into church.
We had a conversion experience. I had a conversion experience. I thought we had a conversion experience. 6 months later, I found out she did not have a conversion experience. I had the conversion experience. It happened on New Year's Day, 1975. The holidays had been the worst time.
And those of you who have lost loved ones know that.
If you've lost it, you don't want to go through Christmas. You don't want to go through Thanksgiving. You don't want to go through any of that time because all you think about is all the times when you had been together with that loved one. And so you just want to get it over with. We just barraged our grandson with gifts so that we could, in that way, somebody could be enjoying this Christmas season, but we wanted it over as quickly as we could. New Year's Day finally, thankfully came, mercifully came. And we had our daughter over for dinner that night, and they watched the football game. Now, we don't watch football, but we watched the football game so we wouldn't have to talk to each other. And finally they left, it was over, and I said to Penny, you go inside and watch TV, and I'll clean up the kitchen. I'll wash the dishes. And as I was in the kitchen, I had a thought. It's time to go back. And then I went out to shake out the tablecloth in the backyard, and I had another thought. I want to go to church every day. And we had never gone to church every day in our life. Now I wanted to go to church every day. I didn't even know where the church was. I hadn't been to the church since we moved to this town. But I called up the local church, and our beloved Monsignor, who's retired now, and a good old Irishman, gave us the schedule the next day. And then I went into Penny and I said, honey, how would you like to go to church every day?
And then
she
I
looked
had
at me
a thought.
What have you done?
What did he do? But then I had another thought. You see, for 18 years, I'd listened to Bob and the children who were all well educated in the faith, and they would criticize the homily, and I didn't know the Eucharist.
And we'd make fun.
But I felt Jesus in the Catholic Church. I'd been to many churches because my father said, as long as there's a church, you got to go to church on Sunday. He didn't care. There wasn't a Catholic church there. He brought you to a Methodist church, a Presbyterian church, a Lutheran church. He didn't care. But I never felt Jesus anywhere but in the Catholic Church. And I didn't know why. So I would pray and I'd say, Lord, let him want to come to church. Just let him want to come. Because I know. Sometimes he'd sleep with his eyes open. You know how they do? And I was really hurt. I wanted him to be part of what I felt in the church. I said, and boy, I told you to take over in my son's life. The night my son died, I had just told the Lord, take him, he's yours. And you knew I didn't mean that, take him. Now for 18 years, I prayed that Bob would want to go to church, and now he's going to leave me, divorce me, and become a priest.
I became so excited. That first day we went back to Mass, so excited. And as it turned out, our Monsignor was the celebrant. It wasn't the homily. He talked about the football games.
Which we didn't understand.
So that was nothing for. But when he raised the host in consecration, I was in tears. I was just in tears. And when the sign of peace came, I turned to Penny. I was crying. She was crying. We hugged each other, but what I didn't realize is that she wasn't crying for the same reason that I was crying for. I was back, and she thought I was going to divorce her and become a priest. This went on for 6 months.
And I went through the motions. But you see, God has a plan.
You know, when you talk about my husband we're not in the same place, it's frightening. She was frightened. Truly.
And how do you compete with God? You know, if that is your competition, how do you compete with God? A God that I refuse to believe in, a God that I was never going to trust again. You see, when you say the Lord's Prayer, what does it mean to you? When I lost my son, both of us vowed we would never say that again. Do you realize the implications of that prayer? The abandonment that you make to God with that prayer? The next time
you're at Mass, or even tonight when you go home,
say it.
Read the Lord's Prayer slowly. And
think about what you're saying.
Think about everything, absorb everything that you're saying in that prayer. It is a tremendous commitment.
Thy will be done.
Thy will be done. That's
Thy will.
Very scary.
Whatever you say, Lord, your will.
You know, thy will be done for today, for now, for the next 10 minutes. But then if something goes wrong, I take it back again. We never let God's will be done. We don't allow that. And so finally, on Marriage Encounter Weekend on May 23rd, in fact, we're almost at our anniversary, aren't we? 10 days from now will be our anniversary. May 23rd, 1975 changed our lives completely.
You know, I say you cut a Catholic and he bleeds Catholic. I mean, you know, you can say anything, you can yell, you can scream, you can call yourself anything
whatever,
you want.
And you cut them and they're Catholic.
Anything you want to call it. You want to call yourself a Methodist? Good. You're still a Catholic. You know, you're just a Catholic. And so...
one time we were talking with your ex-bishop, and he was sharing about when he was down in the Dominican Republic, or wherever it was down in Central America, and a lot of the people had gone over to the Pentecostals, and one day there was a bomb scare in this one Pentecostal church, and all these Hispanics were running out of the Pentecostal church praying the rosary. You cut a Catholic and they're Catholic. They bleed Catholic.
So anyway, there we are in church, right? And I'm not having any part of this. I'm going along the motions, but I ain't trusting him. As far as I'm concerned, he and I are not friends. I don't want to know him anymore. And
this is very Italian, by the way. Very Italian. That's the way they do it. They have big fights with God. Now, the Irish would just take a paper bag and put it over the head of the Sacred Heart.
My husband always walks away when I say something. Anyway, so my husband, the Holy Spirit always talks to him. He doesn't know it, but he's always talking to him. So he sees this couple going up holding hands.
To receive communion.
To receive communion. He goes, gee, that's nice. Let's do that.
I mean, I was so in love with anything and everything that had to do with church. It was such a honeymoon experience.
We joined the Legion of Mary. I mean, there was nothing we didn't do.
We did. I mean, we were spiritual hogs. We did anything we could get. When we went on this Marriage Encounter Weekend, after it was over, we would have done anything. Sweep the floors, write talks for the people, take care of the kids, anything we could do to be a part of church.
But anyway, so he decides, well, we didn't know that marriage encounter couples do that. We didn't know that. So this big, tall Italian, I call him St. Anthony. Anthony's always been important in my life. Comes over and he says, when did you go on your encounter? Encounter?
What is an encounter?
1975, you know what encounters were. You know, touchy-feely and all that kind of stuff.
Especially
it wasn't good. It was not good. And my husband is very protective. So he says, listen, we want you to come to an information talk. You know, Bob says, listen, I got a good marriage and I don't want anybody messing around with it. And the one who does not believe in Jesus, not having any part of it, says, but
it's by the church.
It's got to be good. You see the way we Catholics are? We're crazy. We're really crazy. We're crazy in love with Jesus and his church. We don't know any better. So, okay, we go on marriage account. Now, They tell you, this is communication. You're learning communication skills. I should have known right there and then there's a hitch to this, because Bob and I talked all our lives. I mean, he's my best friend. But, again, it's the church. Now, I don't believe in the church, but it's the church.
With the microphone.
So we go down.
Yes.
So we go on the weekend. And I learned a lot about myself on the weekend. Some things I liked and some things I didn't like. But one thing I knew, that nothing in the world was worth as much as my relationship with my spouse. And I wanted to spend the rest of my life making him happy. I wanted to give up control. Now that's hard for Italian women. We tell our husbands, and you should see them in Italy, the men strut around like this, but it's the woman who runs the family.
I'm just reading about Mother Cabrini.
That woman runs a family. She dresses him up and everything, but she runs it. And I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to turn my whole life over to this man. What I didn't know was I was turning it over to Jesus. I never would have done that. I never would have done that. But he robbed my heart. And we fell madly in love with him. We wanted to tell the whole world about him, but we didn't think we would. You see, you don't know who you are. Us? Well, we thought we can sweep the floor in the church and we'll babysit, and my husband's a good typist. He could type the talks for other couples who are good at talking. We're not good at talking. Then when we started to talk one-on-one with people, we kept saying we could never talk to big groups of people. We can talk one-on-one with people, but big groups? Then this woman calls up one day, and I thought she's ready for this is after we come back. After we came back to the church, the woman calls up. She was going to go on pilgrimage with us, and it's the time of terrorism, She calls up, and she canceled the pilgrimage. She wasn't high on my list, I was waiting for everybody to come. Anyway, she said, I had a dream about you. Now, she'd never met us. So I said, how could you have a dream about us? She said, you were in a large auditorium. And even the bleachers were filled with people. And people were standing and people were sitting in the aisles. And you and your husband were talking to them. I thought, boy, oh boy, I'm glad you're not coming on pilgrimage because you've really lost it.